Hi everyone, thanks for coming here virtually. This is Yijing, and I'm happy to share my trajectories at AI as well as my experiences working in the learning analytics field as a data science fellow. Today I'm going to talk about how we utilize data assets of a digital education tool and specifically how we analyze lurking behaviors on ViewPoint. So first off, a little bit about me. I'm Yijing Chen. I'm a master's student studying data science at the School of Information, and I've been working here as a data science fellow in the R&D team since last October. I am generally interested in computer-mediated communication and data science stuff. I study and I spend my time in social media and online conversations, and I'm curious about how we are connected and divided by the internet with its digital culture, and I question where that's leading us towards. Being clear about what I'm ultimately interested in and what I'm truly passionate about from the very beginning actually helped me to dive into the data science project here from a very unique perspective. And in today's learning analytics field, I believe that there are actually tons of opportunities for me to look at how people interact with each other via digital education tools. And at AI, I'm very lucky to work with an interesting data set retrieved from ViewPoint. And I have a chance to observe how students are engaged in online simulations. Well, many of you may not be familiar with ViewPoint yet, but since now we are all living in this new normal social distance life, I bet a lot of you have experiences using other digital tools to facilitate learning or collaborations in a broader sense. Tools such as Slack, Yijing, Zoom, etc. They are all digital platforms where we can communicate with each other virtually, synchronously or asynchronously, privately or publicly. So ViewPoint is much like these tools. It is a communication platform designed to facilitate role-based simulations where students are assigned a specific role and they can negotiate with each other either collectively or individually to work out a solution in a particular problem setting. On ViewPoint, students can send private or group messages. They can send public announcements, which is much like tweets. They can review their peers and vote for a specific decision branch. For instructors, ViewPoint is a novel tool to streamline this whole process of simulation operation and to collect abundant data sets during simulations. Now, the question is, with all these new data sets available, what can we do? How can we utilize the data assets within these digital education tools, and how can we develop insights to improve the design of the product as well as the class? Well, these are all very broad topics that many of the learning analytics professionals here have been working on in their settings. Today, I'm not going to provide an ultimate solution, but hopefully I'm providing some fresh ideas or some heuristics case in point. For much of my work at AI, I will summarize them into this diagram, which is a loop of constant reflection and exploration to think about 4 fundamental questions. Now, when I dropped it out this part of my slides, I stopped here for a moment because I really don't want to make my presentation like a boring high-level abstract illustration of frameworks. So instead of talking about all these frameworks, I'm gonna go over these questions with a story of how we analyze lurking behaviors in ViewPoint, and I'm gonna share some of our interesting findings. Throughout the ViewPoint project here, we regularly meet with Dr. Elizabeth Gerber, the professor who first came up with this amazing idea, and she's also one of the instructors who has used ViewPoint in real classroom settings. So this process really helped us to understand the tool from the instructor's standpoint, and we are all very clear that ViewPoint is not a tool to replace offline simulations, but it is an alternative channel to facilitate face-to-face interactions. Knowing that the ultimate goal is to help students more engaged in simulation, we framed our research question as, how can we measure students' engagement with what we can observe in online simulations? Now, I've come to the second stage. What data do we have? It is fundamentally important because as a data scientist, data is the very first ingredient for me to prepare reports and hopefully to find some valuable insights. Within ViewPoint, I found that we have a very rich messaging dataset which recorded all activities of group and private messages. So I'm excited to start it from here to see whether I can aggregate these message activities by students and compare the individual level activities. This is when I first noticed that while there were some really active students in online simulations, there's another type of students who were not that visible, meaning that they didn't talk a lot, but they still actively read a large portion of messages they received, which seems like something I would do in some settings. So I come off and think and thought, this is interesting. I want to identify and characterize these lurkers to understand how students engage in different ways. So with this focus in mind, I reviewed some relevant literature about online lurking behaviors and online lurking behaviors in learning environment. And I developed some quantitative measures and criteria to identify these lurkers, which is given their numbers of messages received, the number of messages they send is proportionally small, but the numbers of messages they read is proportionally large. I labeled these users as lurkers and others as non-lurkers, and I analyzed one large simulation dynamically to observe students' behaviors. And I also present other findings to my team, such as when did they send messages and who did they interact with. I present all these label data and visualizations to my team and to Professor Discover, and we talk about other possible values that we could pursue. We are at the third stage of how should we interpret these results, and I personally think that this is the most critical step for me, because in any attempt of measurement, this is a step when we subjectively extract insights and make data-driven decisions. So when we are looking at all these label data, my team was like, wait a minute, we really need to be careful about the underlying assumptions and be clear about what we've identified and what's missing here. Are these students really lurking in simulations? Are we really identifying those true lurkers? So we thought about other possibilities that, like, it could be that some students are using public announcements instead of the messaging function, or some of them are more comfortable negotiating face-to-face, or just proportionally, some students are overloaded with too many messages that they could not reply to all of them. So not sending a lot of messages online does not necessarily indicate that they are literally lurkers in simulations. So the way we interpret this result with caution is first acknowledging the limitations of work and conclude that now, based on what we could observe from their message activities, some students are more active while others are quieter in online simulations. And we revised the definition and our identification method based on some flaws and limitations, and we validate our findings with in-depth case studies. That interpretation leads us to our fourth stage, which is what else can we explore to make our analysis more comprehensive? Things like role-based features, peer-review data, and public announcement activities. And we also consider possibilities of finding ways to collect face-to-face interaction data and try to combine online and offline data to analyze them together. All of these next steps will be fed into the very first stage of reflecting why we use the tool and rethinking what we want from it. And then we will start with our second round of analysis and so on. So now let's take a look at the loop. We tried to understand the tool from the very beginning, and we were very clear about our overarching question and our needs. And then we explored the data with this focus in mind, and we extract some findings and carefully interpret them. Finally, we thought about future works and possible future steps. It is not technically a flat loop, but a process of continuous reflection and improvement. Taking these little steps inches forward actually helps me to get a sense of how to manage my pace in a research-oriented work where there are a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity involved. And thanks to my team, and particularly I want to thank Liz and Kate for being supportive all the time, I have been able to contribute to such an interesting project while developing the skill sets that I found really useful. Okay, so this is pretty much I want to share today. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or you are curious about other details. Now let's get into the Q&A section.